Andrew Rohrmann, aka Andy, aka scntfc is my pseudonym. So we're going to talk about how to make your music as adaptive as possible for the game that you're probably making, I'm assuming. So I wanted to avoid cliches, but I have to do one, which is one, who here is a musician who wants or does make music for games? Okay, put those down. And then how many people are developers who are looking for musicians to put the music in the games? Okay, thanks. So I'm going to go back and forth. So some of this stuff may be old hat to you, so be patient. I'm going to talk through a little bit of my background first, because it does really inform what I do now when making music for games. So first, the name comes from being a DJ and live performer. There's a magazine with a very similar name, so that was the joke, was we dropped the C. You get that, but everybody, I thought I was being clever, everybody just thought I was stupid. So we put the C back in, and then immediately got confused with the magazine. So hence dropping the last word and dropping a bunch of vowels, so we end up with that. So under these various monikers, throughout the years, I've put out a bunch of records, vinyl, CDs, MP3s, whatnot. And one of the driving forces behind this was I've always been fascinated by electronic music and sampling, starting with, I think, all the way back to Art of Noise in the early 80s through hip-hop producers like the Bomb Squad, the Dust Brothers, people who took what is already music, or maybe isn't music at all, chop it up and turn it into something new, which again becomes music. Fascinated me, and so I started doing this on a cheap computer in the 90s and kind of hacking things together. But all the time, at the same time, I was still DJing, which was a separate act. It was taking other people's music, putting it on a turntable, matching it up with tempo-wise with music over here, and then mixing between the two. But as I progressed, I started seeing the similarities and wanting to make them meld somewhere in between. So that ended up becoming what is called Mass Destruction, which was a mix and live performance series I was doing throughout the 2000s, where every single constituent element was being remixed and then put in to a DJ mix, and then the next DJ mix would take those previous elements and chop them up even more. This is illustrated really well by a website called Mashup Breakdown. You can kind of see it up in the corner, where it parses a text file of all that musical information. So you can play the music grabbed from SoundCloud, and it will show you the constituent elements as it proceeds. So it's a really kind of great graphical presentation of that concept, and you'll see how it relates to what happened next. So I was also making my living concurrently by writing original music for film and TV, but it was all very linear. You go from A, start, B, stop. That's pretty much the extent of how that music is created and how it interacts with whatever the media is. But then I had a very, very fortunate chance meeting with, at my local coffee shop even, telling a friend about making music for a Microsoft ad, and who was sitting at the next table but Guy Whitmore, who was at the time the audio director for Microsoft Game Studios. So he overheard me, and we got to talking. He had seen me perform a few times, and he's got a good history and a lot of great philosophies about adaptive music and how it can be developed. And he right away saw the synergy between adaptive music for video games and this crazy thing I was doing here. So we'd meet for coffee and talk about ways we could integrate these two ideas. You know, what if a video game had one big interactive mix as the score or the soundtrack? And we really wanted to put this in a game. Then one popped up that it seemed like it would relate to pretty well, called Crackdown 2. So I came on board in the prototyping phase, but thanks to lawyers and costly licensing fees, the idea was scaled back. So we get back to just remixing, but I got to remix some people that you might have heard of, and I'm going to play a bit because this is a a good segue in terms of music, going from just a static song and then manipulating that song so it relates to the content of a game. So let's see.
Come, you masters of war, here that build the big guns, here that build the death planes, here that build all the bombs. You hide in your mansion while the young people's blood flows out of their bodies and is buried in the mud. And I hope that you die.
All right, you get the idea. So that's an example of a song that has a particular feeling to it, and then giving it some sort of twist so it's applicable directly to the plot of the game, which was really important to me and I think worked successfully, but we're still stuck in that paradigm of you start the song and then the song ends, and at the most, maybe you could loop it, but that's about all you're getting in terms of adaptiveness. So we're going to switch gears a little and talk about the mechanical structure of a song. So here you see, and I'll use my hands to represent it, a song is made up of constituent elements, and one of the first things you can do to make it more adaptable is just split it apart. So now, if you import your sound files into a game in this manner, now you have access to turning each of these on and off. So if the strings of a part of a particular cue are more applicable, you could solo those or drop those out and give room for the other instruments, like your the ones at the bottom that are very important. Then the next thing you can do, because you're still just going linearly A to B, is slice that vertically. And now what you've done, you still have the separate constituent elements, but now you have discrete points at which you can jump to or loop if you'd like. So you can start to see where particular game parameters or plot points you could move around this grid to highlight the emotions that you're trying to convey in the game itself. So that thing looks a lot like this thing, which looks a lot like this thing. So you can see a paradigm has developed, and this is very common for musicians, especially electronic musicians and people who use Ableton Live. Ableton calls it the session grid, but it's just become the grid, and it's a paradigm that a lot of composers are familiar with. So each of these little squares can have a little chunk of music on it, and you can either turn those squares on and off individually, or at the right, the little play buttons can launch a whole row at once. So that's a pretty neat way that, again, with the Mass Destruction project, I was able to perform really adaptively for a live audience, but that adaptiveness can obviously apply to video games. So I had this idea still backburnered. I was starting to do more video game music and was introduced to Jake Kasdal and the team at 17-Bit right at the time that they had a demo of what would become Galak-Z and just had temp music in there. And I loved the temp music. It was some beat-based kind of synth stuff that I loved anyway. So me making music for this or helping them curate music for this project seemed like a natural. So I went, apologies, I'm using this as my notes, so just so you know why I might be jumping back and forth with the slides. So I went home, back to the grid, and whipped up a demo, taking other people's music and looping it just really quickly, just so I could get the idea across. Brought it to 17-Bit and literally, let's go back to that, look at this. Kind of like narrated what would be happening in the game while I was changing the music. So I'm like, okay, man, imagine here come some enemies and you're fighting them, and I press a button and it gets a little more active, and then, oh, you won, and there's a little kind of victory dance, and then, oh, it's mellow again. So totally primitive, but it got the point across. And while giving this demo, they were excited musically, but one of their engineers, Paul Schreiber, was paying really close attention and asking a lot of questions. So it was kind of a, okay, great, you got the job moment. So I went and started kind of going through the feasibility of developing music for the game, but not really thinking how this would end up being utilized. And luckily, Paul Schreiber's taking dutiful notes was because he was building something that became what is called Audio17, which looks like this. And when you look at this, you can obviously see that paradigm. They're stretched a little, but that's a grid. Those are tracks, and those are chunks of music. And over on the right, those are game parameters. And those game parameters can then look across this column, or across these rows, and trigger whichever ones need to happen to hit a particular point in the game. So that's Audio17. I just want to make a point that I'm trying to keep this a little generic, just so you're not like tied to one platform. I know a lot of people use Wise or Fmod Studio, and all these have amazing capabilities that can be applied to a lot of these ideas. Which brings me to something, which is my surprise micro talk. How to break into the world of sound design in 2 easy steps. Step 1, learn this. Step 2, learn this. Okay, that's it. Back to the regular talk. But I can't emphasize that stuff enough. Even if you're a musician and you're like, yeah, I just make music, learn those things because everybody uses them. And at the very least, you'll be able to learn the vocabulary to keep up a discussion when you're talking with developers. So back to this, which is everybody should know is the Unity logo. That was the platform that Galak-Z was being developed in. And that's where they made Audio17. So this is a rare occurrence where something I would say is hyper sophisticated, it's really, really cool and amazing, was built within the tool itself and provides a great place for weirdos like me who don't know anything about code and the people, the geniuses who know code, we can meet in between in something that makes sense to both of us. So let's step back again, away from the tools, and for developers, go through the thought process of what is the game you're making and how do you want music to be a part of it. And this is going all the way back to the topic of doing this on an indie budget. I can't emphasize enough how much planning is important to keeping costs low and understanding the process from doing initial demos and ideation all the way to getting the final product. So you've got your thing. You probably, at this point, already know what it's going to be, all this stuff. So you've got that in mind, and then the next thing to ask yourself is, well, what's the overall feeling? Is it a fast-paced game like an FPS, or is it like a card game, trading game, strategy? There's a lot of places on the spectrum that it can fit, generally. And we're going to keep drilling down to more specifics as we go. Keep asking yourself those questions. Some of them are applicable to you, some aren't. You're going to be making your own list, so there you go. Questions, question your questions. Then you can start thinking about how this will work technically. So is tempo important? I have on the slide tempo or no tempo. Not necessarily that, but just how important is it for your music to segue comfortably from one point in the game to the other? Like, if you've got lots of level load screens, obviously you've got some sort of weird non-game transition that you're jumping out of the game world anyway, so it might not matter. And then this is kind of the same terminology that was on the last slide, but action versus ambient. Now we're in your game, and are there points in the game where there's a lot of action that you're wanting to punctuate with the music? And then in between that, are there ambient components where, okay, maybe we don't need to be as heavily interactive and we can just kind of let the music flow? Then the next step is to think back again to this grid and how quickly, depending on the type of action that's happening in your game, are you going to want things to change? Is it entire songs? Like every level, I want to have the same song? Done. Is it, and in musical terms, is it 8-bar loops? Is it 4 bars? Is it 1 bar? And then even smaller than that, you can get down to half bars, chord notes, eighth notes, and then even stingers, which would lay over the top of any tempo information. And most people will be familiar with from a sound design standpoint, like sword hits or whatever. You can do that with music too, and have it lay on top. So now that we've got a rough idea of the grid that we want to work within, then it's time to define the parameters that are in your game that you want to be reflected by the way the music changes. And again, this is a list, but it's going to be different for everyone. You'll make your own list. You might have sweet chibos, you might not. You just have to keep adding things to the list and then prioritize and basically let the ones that are most important float to the top. So going through these, destroy the Death Star moment is like a game victory, time of day. Maybe you go to one location and it's noon, and then you go to that same location again and it's midnight, or you stand there the whole time and watch time change. Maybe you want that to affect the music, the location, changing regions in the game. You want a dungeon to sound different than outer space, and we'll get to that in a minute. So keep listing things and keep that list close by, because those parameters then will be named and be used directly within the project you're working on. So I'm going to jump now to the specifics of Galak-Z and how it works as kind of a case study for what we decided on. So we had a general idea of the musical style. Oops, wrong button. So I went about writing music and then slicing it up into those layers that we saw earlier for separate instruments that I felt and we felt should respond to particular things within the game that we, again, made our list and thought were the top priorities. So looking at the grid then, we split it this way, separated those instruments, again, on delineations which I thought were important and needed to change a lot, and change separately from each other. So this is a kind of a side note. If any of these don't need to interact or react differently than others, they can be flattened and combined just for efficiency's sake. But looking at the grid, now we can see how those chunks of music can relate to the parameters that we just defined. So in Galak-Z, there's different regions. You can fly around in the asteroid field as long as you want. You can never go anywhere else if you feel like it. That's got a particular mood to it. But then you can move into the caves, and we have it transitioning, hopefully seamlessly, into that different region. And you can go right back out. It'll flip back to the asteroid field music. And then below that, you can see we have different enemy classes that you can engage with in the game. Each of these has some sort of musical component that can layer on top of the regions. They also mesh well with each other because you never know who you're going to come across. You never know how quickly you're going to defeat them. So it could very well happen that all three of those enemy classes are in the same place at the same time. If you've got a music system that's saying, okay, play the bug music, okay, play the pirate music, and then it just turns into chaos. This is one of the things we're paying attention to, is how all these pieces mesh together. Then below that, we've got other, more particular states, like boss battle may have different music entirely. A victory state or a loss state, you have to have something that punctuates the action. So that's next. Okay, so now it's time to show this thing again. And I'm going to, like I mentioned, the stupid clunky demo I gave 17-bit back in the day, I'm going to do that now. Clunkily, again, I'm going to talk through it using the same tool, Ableton Live, because it's the one that interfaces with this thing. And I'm just going to move through it. So the idea is set the tone. You drop into a new level. Well, this is pretty cool, but there might be some danger. So you're floating around. You can add parts to it, up at intensity or not. But maybe the player, since we're not, they can totally roam freely. Maybe they do just shoot out into space and they don't get into a fight. So then we go back to this, and it's just mellow, and they're running around shooting asteroids. No big deal. So yeah, mellow, But maybe you are even out in the asteroid field and you come across some bugs. So the bugs engage. They've got a little synth that says, okay, you're fighting bugs. Maybe the action ramps up. Yeah, here's the thing. I can hold it. Okay. So anyway, so there's some more action. Maybe the bugs come back. You're fighting them. It's going all right, but then, then some pirates show up. And that's going well. Then maybe kill all the bugs. Pirates can kill all the bugs. Now you're just fighting them. Okay. Beat up all the pirates. Okay, good. But it's still intense. The battle's still going on. Killing your last few enemies. And then, a little relief. Okay, we've got some downtime. Maybe shooting around the caves still. Maybe there's a few things left to do. But the action has dropped down a notch. Again, tons of options here. Maybe you've accomplished whatever the level mission is. It's done, so there's a little kind of victory dance for you. And you're leaving the caves and back into the asteroid field. And so that's an example, very condensed, and again, me kind of talking through it, how the system works. Okay, thank you. One note I'll make about Ableton Live versus Audio17 is you may have noticed, I think I kind of got scooted past them, but you may notice abrupt changes musically. That's something that Audio17 has tackled by being able to crossfade from one to the other, so you wouldn't encounter those if you were using Audio17. So, back to talking musically is the fine-tuning of the musical aspects. You can throw all this stuff on the grid, but there's a lot of endless amounts of gameplay to make sure things are reacting correctly. And then there's the musical fine-tuning to make sure things are flowing and natural. We never want the player to feel like they're paying attention to the music. They may enjoy it, but it always has to fit into the overall environment and the mood of the game. So this is a simple list of kind of musical terms. So phrasing is like 4-bar, 8-bar. You want to make sure that the musical progression is syncing up and you're not getting, like, say, one progression is just ending and another one's starting and you ruin the feel of it. Again, what I mentioned with Audio17, that fixes transitions and fades, so you shouldn't really hear when you're moving from one element to the other. Tempo. The way Audio17 works is it's a consistent tempo per what's called a DJ. So a DJ is that grid I showed. So everything in that one grid's going to be the same tempo, but you can put as many DJs into Unity as you want. So if you do need to make a tempo transition, you just stop one DJ and start the next one, which is, again, very handy. And then musically, just keep things in key or be able to change key appropriately. So that's a quick rundown of things musical things to keep in mind for everyone. So again, I want to say this is kind of the end of the talk, but I just want to say huge thanks to 17-Bit not only for hiring me, but for me to come in and have this stupid idea and see it executed so well is just amazing. So Audio17 is a thing that will be available for Unity, and if anybody's interested in getting access to it, I think the best way will be to either ping me on Twitter with your interest or hand me a business card, and we'll put together kind of a list of beta testers who can give it a spin. So yeah, back to 17-Bit, I just wanted to say, let's turn off this background music. Thank you. We have those production credits, at the end of TV shows. Oh, where's our music? Any possible music mix? No? Okay. Oh wait, we have a parent company. Here's our parent company.
Cool.
Okay, that's the end. Thank you. I have 1 minute left, so if there's any questions, there's a microphone right there.
So here's a composer question. My name's Phil Servati. Are you thinking entirely musically up front in your process, and then you're going in and editing?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the way 17-bit first hears the songs, they're songs. So, but I'm working modularly from the beginning. So I'm basically writing it as songs, but the whole time I'm thinking of that parameter list. And so I'm like, there are maybe 10, 15 different songs, but every time I'm like, what will the bugs do in this one? And so, yeah, they are linear from the start, but with that idea that it will get chopped up and then spread back out again as the game progresses.
Thanks. So both in terms of tools and in terms of your talk, lots of information about going from game systems to audio, so audio can react to games. Have you put any thought into or found any tools that are effective for going the other direction, where you have music and you want the game to react to the music in some way?
I haven't personally, but I think there's a lot of them out there. Off the top of my head, I can think of Fez being a game that used a lot of music and sound and even, spoiler alert, controller vibration. So there were a lot of sound elements that, yeah, there was that interplay between music and sound telling the game what to do and vice versa. That's it? Oh, sorry, that's it. But just come say hi and I'll answer questions directly. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, very good.